So what we're talking about here is circles, and the first question is, how do you talk about how big a circle is? How do you measure a circle? So the first challenge is to actually draw a circle. I don't know if you know anything about art, but the artist Giotto impressed the Pope with his skills by drawing a perfect circle. Now, I'm not Giotto, so bear with me here. This is my attempt at a perfect circle, and we want to see how big this circle is. Now, there's two ways that I can measure a circle. Now, if you're a plumber, you want to know how wide the circle is. Just like that. So I'm talking about the width of a circle. Now, this is called the diameter. All right, so that's diameter. And we'll just write a little d for diameter. So diameter is the total width of a circle. Now, mathematicians actually prefer to use something else when you measure a circle. What we like to do is use something called the radius. Now, a radius actually starts from the center of the circle and goes to the outside. Notice that it doesn't go all the way across. It's only halfway. So radius is half of the diameter. All right, so we have radius and we have diameter. So those are the two different ways to actually measure a circle. Now, there's a relationship between diameter and radius. Notice before how I said that the radius is half of the diameter. So we can actually write that out. If d is my diameter, so notice that it takes two of these radiuses to actually make an entire diameter. And technically, I should say radii. If you say radius, I'm not going to crucify you. So two radiuses. So in other words, diameter is 2 times the radius. Now this is in terms of r, right? This is diameter in terms of r. Now I could actually write it in terms of diameter. In other words, what does the radius equal? That's the question. So if you want r by itself, we just divide by 2. And if I divide both sides by 2, these cancel out. So I'm left with r over here, d over 2 here. Now, some of you probably prefer it to write a little differently. When I say d divided by 2, that's the exact same thing as saying d times 1/2. All right, so it's the exact same thing, d times 1/2. So in other words, radius equals the diameter times 1/2. Or if we go up here, let me redraw this so it's clear. So we could also say diameter equals 2 times the radius. All right, so those are the two relationships. This one here, and let me rephrase this, r equals diameter times 1/2. So those are the two relationships, all right? We have diameter, we have radius. So that's how to go. How do you go from one to the other? We'll just look at these guys right here, and they will tell you. Now, so far, we have two ways to measure a circle. We have diameter, which is the total width, radius, which is basically half the width. Now, there's another way that I can classify a circle, and that is talking about the perimeter. How far around is the entire circle? So that's what we're going to do next. Let's start with the circle. And the question is, how do you find the perimeter of a circle? Now, the perimeter of a circle actually has a special name. It's the circumference. So circumference is actually the perimeter of a circle. That is how long is the circle if you measure it all around. So for circumference, there's two different formulas, because remember, we have diameter and we have radius. Now let's look at the radius first. Now remember, radius is just half the width of a circle. So for circumference, this is our formula. I'm going to use a C for circumference. Again, same thing as perimeter. So C is going to be 2 pi r. Now that is the formula for the circumference. Now pi, some of you remember pi, but remember pi is approximately, and when I have the wavy looking equality, that means approximately. So pi is approximately 3.14. All right, so my circumference is going to be 2 times 3.14 times my radius. So for example, suppose my radius is, I don't know, let's say 2. All right, so the radius is 2. And the question is, what's the circumference of the circle if the radius is 2? We like to have units, so let's just say 2 inches. So 2 little marks mean inches, so 2 inches. So if I want the circumference, all I got to do is just plug in. So this is my radius. 2 is the radius. So I can bring down 2 times pi. Now pi is 3.14. My radius is going to also be 2. So that is going to be the circumference. Now I know 2 times 2 is 4. So I've got 4 times 3.14. And I can multiply this out here. 3.14 times 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 is 1. That would be 5. That would be 12. So my final answer here would be 12.56 inches. That would be the circumference. So that's the circumference if you're using the radius. So again, this is the radius. Radius is half the width. All right, and suppose I had a different number. I could say something else. I could have, what if I had, let's say 5. So if I want the circumference, if it's now 5, you're just going to do circumference equals 2 times pi, which is 3.14, times 5. All right, and this one is actually easy to work out. 2 times 5 is 10. So we got 10 times 3.14. 10 times 3.14. That's super duper easy. All I got to do is move the decimal over one place because I'm multiplying by a tens. So that would actually be 31.4. So in this case, circumference would be 31.4 inches. So that's with radius. Now I could also try it with diameter. So let's try this with diameter here. Now I have a circle. Diameter, remember, is the total width that goes all the way across. Okay, this is diameter. Now let's just suppose, let's pick up where we left off. So in the last problem, the radius was 5. Now if a circle has a radius of 5, then I know the diameter has to be 10. Because remember, diameter equals 2 times the radius. So let's see if we actually get the same answer. So my diameter here is going to be 10 inches. So that's 10 inches is my diameter. Now, if you had diameter, the formula for circumference, and you can probably already kind of guess what this is, because remember, with radius, it was 2 pi r. And I could always rearrange that. I could say, let's do, how about 2r pi? There we go. Now 2r, remember, that's 2 times r right here. If you have 2, if you got like a variable right next to a number, that means that you multiply. If there's nothing in between, that means you multiply. So this is 2 times r. But notice what I have up here. Diameter equals 2 times r. So I can actually redo this. I could replace this with substitution. I could say d for diameter times pi. So circumference equals diameter times pi. So that's the form that you're going to use if you have diameter. So let's do an example here. So we have 10 inches is my diameter, right? And remember we said that pi is about 3.14. So let's plug all this in here. So circumference is going to equal diameter, which is 10. So I'm going to have 10 inches times 3.14. And if I multiply that out, again, very easy. If I'm multiplying by 10, I just move the decimal back one space because it's getting 10 times bigger. When I multiply by 10, it's getting 10 times bigger. And each of these places is worth 10, right? So if I move this back, I make it 10 times bigger. So I get 31.4. So one more time, 31.4 is actually 10 times bigger than 3.14. All right, so my final answer here is 31.4 inches. That's with a circle that has a diameter of 10 inches. That's the exact same thing as a circle that has a radius of 5 inches. So for my radius of 5 inches, diameter of 10 inches, I should get 31.4 for both. So this is for diameter. When we use the diameter, we got 31.4. Let's make sure we got the same answer using radius. Using radius with 5 inches, I get 31.4. So we got the exact same answer. So in the end, it's up to you for which formula you want to use. So for example, if I'm given a circle, let's just say they tell me the radius is 2.5. Let's just say 2.5 feet. Okay, so 2.5 feet, if that's my radius is 2.5 feet, then I could rewrite it. I could say, well, you know what? I like working with diameter better. And I know that diameter is twice the radius. So I can work with 5 instead of working with 2.5. So when you're doing multiplication, that actually might be a little bit easier for you. Again, it's all up to you. It's your choice. But just remember the formula. So for diameter, we're going to use circumference equals diameter times pi. For radius, we're going to use circumference equals 2 times pi times r. All right? So those are the two different ways that you can actually find circumference. So again, it depends. Are you using radius or are you using diameter? Just to recap, the diameter is all the way across. The radius only goes halfway. And the other thing that we can talk about in a circle so far is the circumference. Remember, circumference is the perimeter of a circle. And there were two formulas for circumference. Both of them involve pi. So let's look at diameter first. Remember, for diameter, basically if I take this circle and if I unroll it, think of it like aluminum foil, okay? If I unroll this circle, and if I lay it out like this, it should have about 3.14 of these diameters. So each of these links is a diameter. So I've got 3.14 of these diameters. So that's where we get the formula from. So circumference equals 3.14 times the diameter, or pi times the diameter. So pi times the diameter. And of course, sometimes they might write it like this. Two different ways. Again, it's commutative, so you can switch it around. And the other way of doing it, because remember, now I know that diameter equals 2 times r. So I could also write this as circumference equals pi times 2r, or as I usually write it, 2 pi r. Again, multiplication, you can switch up the order. It's not like subtraction or division. In that case, order matters. All right, but in this case, I can switch up the order. So 2 pi r, that's perfectly fine. So that's going to be my two different kind of circumferences. I could do it this way, or I could find it this way.